I don't know. A lot of places have salad bars now. That's always a good deal, isn't it? Salad bar. Free trip to the salad bar. There's a dream vacation. Johnny Carson hosted thousands of comedians and performers during the 3 decades he ran The Tonight Show. And most of them were entertaining enough to fill 7 minutes. But some guests bombed so hard you could feel the secondhand embarrassment through the screen. Moments where Carson himself couldn't save the segment, no matter how hard he tried. Sometimes these guests were nervous, sometimes their delivery was terrible, and sometimes they just weren't funny at all. These are the 10 most unfunny guests that ever appeared on Johnny Carson. Lee Marvin. Don Rickles was guest hosting for Carson in the 70s, while he was on vacation, and Lee Marvin came out as a guest. It should have been comedy gold, because Rickles could make anyone funny. Except Marvin came off guarded and completely uncooperative from the moment he sat down. "Oh, you're leaving for Hawaii? Right after the show. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful, huh? Okay, on vacationally or what? Maybe a picture or what? No, I work on a boat over there. Oh, I'm a deckhand. I see. Well, don't laugh, folks, it's a funny business. One day you got the Academy Award, the next day you're saying Charlie Turner wrote. But Lee, by the way, good if you get a minute." Lee Rickles kept tossing lines trying to provoke a playful response. That's his whole thing. But Marvin gave short, clipped answers, and maintained this cool, detached demeanor that created long, awkward pockets of silence. "By the way, are you happy with Prime Cut, your new film with Gene Hatton? Are these toughies, Lee? Hey, if I'm going too fast, Lee, you let me know. I did that a year ago. Oh, wonderful. Then we'll go on to something else." Marvin's ego wouldn't let him give the host anything to work with, and the crowd didn't find it funny. They found it uncomfortable. That's the difference between being a tough guy in movies and being a tough guy on a comedy show. Peter O'Toole's first appearance was famously strange and uncomfortable. He showed up drunk, and not the charming kind of drunk. The bombing train wreck drunk. He'd start speaking and it would be complete rambling nonsense, but music he clearly thought he was hilarious. Everyone was rather quiet. "Yes, we didn't fly today. And I wonder why we didn't fly today." "Yes, but didn't you tell me you? It's all becoming clear that you flew on a helicopter today." "I was in a helicopter today, being bounced up and down by some very nice gentlemen about 3 feet from the ground. But not yesterday." Laughter. But clears throat. Friday the 13th is today. Johnny and the audience would sit there in painful silence, barely reacting. The segment dragged on because there was nothing to work with. No coherent stories, no punchlines, just a drunk actor who thought he was killing while everyone watched it fall apart. Yesterday was a very bizarre day. Thank God it wasn't today. It might have been yesterday. It would have been very unfortunate. The oddness of that appearance, music, became part of Tonight Show lore. Not because it was good, because it was so spectacularly awkward, people couldn't look away. Rich Hall's stand-up comedy on The Tonight Show leaned dry and sarcastic, which can die fast if the crowd isn't synced to the exact reference. His delivery was low-key and almost deadpan. Not easy being a vegetarian anymore. Except, well, I don't know. A lot of places have salad bars now. That's always a good deal, isn't it? Salad bar. Free trip to the salad bar. There's a dream vacation. You can watch Hall delivering technically funny lines, but getting minimal response. The energy doesn't match the space. Once a comedian feels the room slip away, every punchline has more pressure than the last. Glad to see the Olympics are coming to town. A lot of weird sports in the Olympics that you'll never see again. They should have the common sports in the Olympics, like fishing. Fishing's a great sport, isn't it? Why don't they have that in the Olympics? On your mark, set, go. If Carson doesn't steer energy back, the whole set feels like it's dragging. That's why viewers remember Hall as bombing. Even though the material wasn't weak, it didn't translate to that format in that moment. Sometimes being funny isn't enough. You have to be funny in the right way for the right room. Grodin was often irritated by the whole premise of being on The Tonight Show. He'd press Carson with aggressively earnest questions that turned segments into what some people call uncomfortable comedy. Why do you face it toward yourself? Is that what you want? Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay. Now it's called My Journey Through Show Business. No, it's called It would be so nice if you weren't here. Then below that is my journey through show business. My journey. Kind of an addenda. Yes, all right. Have you had an interesting journey through show business? No. Then why would somebody buy this? I mean, you tell a lot of antic, don't you? That's why I have to come out here, for it. I have no idea why they should buy it. No, that's the thing that I'm most proud of that I've ever done in my entire career. Now, we're getting something. All right. Grodin would blatantly taunt and offend Carson on his own show, while millions of people at home watched and thought it was funny. He'd continue on after this, question Carson and his show, asking if he really cared about his guests or anything that didn't involve TV. You really care? Yes. What do you care about? I mean, in life, you care about anything. Laughter. Carson played along at first, but his patience visibly began to disappear as the segment continued. He began to get so frustrated with his questions, he'd lash out in front of the audience. Johnny was seemingly tired of the subtle disrespect coming from Grodin, disguised as comedy. The audience often didn't find him funny either, with scattered, confused laughs. Viewers, music, wrote angry letters to NBC calling him disrespectful. The problem with being too committed to an anti-comedy bit is it stops being funny and becomes annoying. Chase's fundamental problem on Carson was that his funniest gear was physical comedy and sarcasm, but the talk show couch specifically rewards warmth and quick conversational improv skills above everything else. When Chase's energy turned prickly or defensive, the audience would stop laughing immediately because it felt genuinely tense and uncomfortable instead of playfully antagonistic, the way good banter should feel. There's a famous brutal Carson quote where Johnny said Chase couldn't ad-lib a fart after a baked bean dinner. That's pretty harsh public criticism coming from Carson, who usually kept his real honest opinions about guests completely private and never said anything negative. Carson was essentially saying in public that Chase needed absolutely everything prepared and scripted in advance, and couldn't do spontaneous riffing the way genuinely good natural talk show guests do, without even thinking about it. And you can absolutely see this limitation play out clearly in Chase's various Carson appearances if you watch them knowing what to look for. When things went off script even slightly or in unexpected directions, he'd visibly get uncomfortable and awkward. Music, the charm and confidence would disappear completely. He'd reach for sarcasm that came off as genuinely mean and cutting instead of funny and playful. The audience would go noticeably quiet with that specific silence. That means people don't know how to react or whether they should laugh. Critics and retrospectives consistently pointed to awkward, uncomfortable pauses in his show and monologues that didn't land with audiences in segments that felt stiff and uncomfortable to watch. Bob Hope. Hope gets frequently called unfunny on Johnny Carson, not because he lacked comedic history or credentials, but because his Tonight Show appearances consistently felt prepackaged and awkwardly stiff. Multiple accounts and retrospectives describe Carson privately getting frustrated that Hope would arrive at the studio with scripted jokes already written out on index cards and wouldn't engage in actual real natural conversation the way other guests did. He'd just sit there waiting for his turn to deliver the next written line from his cards instead of genuinely reacting in the moment to what Johnny was actually saying to him. That created this really weird, uncomfortable energy where jokes were technically happening and being delivered, but nothing felt remotely alive or spontaneous or fun. The audience would give polite laughter because it's Bob Hope and he's a legend and you're supposed to laugh at Bob Hope. But it wasn't real energy or genuine enjoyment, just people being respectful to an icon who wasn't actually being funny in that specific moment. When a guest sounds like they're reading directly from a script, the entire exchange feels fake and lifeless. Carson built his entire show and reputation on spontaneity and real, authentic conversation. Hope came in doing old-school vaudeville timing and pre-written setups that didn't fit the format Carson had created at all. The fundamental mismatch made Hope look dated and unfunny, even though he'd been absolutely killing and making people laugh for decades in other contexts and formats. That's exactly why Hope gets singled out in Carson lore as a prime example of what not to do as a talk show guest. Great legendary comedian with an incredible career. It was completely the wrong approach for this specific show. Rich Little, Little's strongest material was doing rapid-fire celebrity impressions. And that's also precisely why so many people called it unfunny and tedious. It felt like sitting through a long, endless string of different voices without any actual punchlines or jokes underneath. The main joke was just, listen how accurate this sounds, which only works if the audience instantly recognizes who's being mimicked and cares about that person. If they don't immediately know the celebrity being imitated, or the reference is too dated or obscure, the room goes completely quiet, because there's literally nothing else there to laugh at. No actual joke structure underneath the oppression, just pure mimicry and imitation. That recognition dependency is exactly why impression-heavy guests consistently get labeled as flat and boring by viewers, even when the technical skill involved is genuinely impressive and took years to develop. You're watching someone show off their vocal technique instead of actually making you laugh or telling jokes. Little's long Tonight Show run eventually ended badly after he did a Carson impression on the show that Johnny and his lawyer apparently believed was personally offensive and crossed a line. Whether it was actually offensive or just Johnny being overly sensitive about being mimicked on his own show depends entirely on who you ask, but the bookings definitively stopped after that incident. The bigger underlying issue was that Little's act had a very limited shelf life. Once you've heard all the voices and impressions, there's no compelling reason to watch him again. He's doing the same thing every time. Impressions without actual comedy writing are just party tricks, and party tricks get old extremely fast on television, where people want substance. Palace had this extremely high-volume, frantic, sound effect-driven comedy style that either absolutely crushed and killed or completely wore people out, depending entirely on the room and the mood. When it worked, it really worked, and he'd destroy it. When it didn't work, it became desperate and uncomfortable fast. The famous story that everyone repeats is that one night his routine wasn't landing at all, and Carson did his signature bomb sound effect after a joke died completely. Then, supposedly, Callis physically shoved Carson in response and got permanently banned from the show forever. That story became an absolute legend in Tonight Show history. Here's the problem with that legend. It's heavily disputed by multiple people. There was actually a published correction in the media saying definitively that Callis did not shove Carson, and Carson did not announce any kind of ban on air during the show. So what actually happened that night? What we know for absolute sure is that people who watched remember that particular appearance as deeply, deeply awkward and uncomfortable. Callis visibly got more frantic and louder as laughs didn't come. The energy in the studio got progressively weirder. Carson made it very clear through body language that the bit wasn't working. Whether there was an actual physical shove or not, the evening became infamous as a prime example of a comedian spiraling and losing control when the audience absolutely wasn't with him. That's what made Callis genuinely unfunny in that specific moment, not the material itself. The desperation, watching someone work harder and harder and get louder and more frantic for laughs that simply aren't coming, is genuinely painful for everyone. The legend grew and spread around a note that felt like a complete disaster. Even if the specific details got exaggerated and distorted over time through retelling, Johnny Carson himself, Carson's bombs are remembered because he didn't panic when they happened. He often made the failure itself the joke. There are surviving monologues where punchlines get little to no reaction, and Johnny openly acknowledges it, riffing on the silence instead of pretending it didn't happen. In one well-known example, he pivots into a physical bit after the room stays quiet, turning embarrassment into a new laugh opportunity. And in other clips, you can see even Carson sometimes hits a stretch, where joke after joke doesn't lift, and nothing's working. The audience sits there politely waiting for something to land. That's exactly why Carson bombing became its own kind of legendary late-night moment. Even the master had nights where nothing worked. The difference is he knew how to acknowledge it and move on. They'd panic, or get defensive, or work harder. Carson would just shrug and make the bomb part of the show. That's what separated him from everyone else who bombed on his stage. Fred Rogers. Rogers wasn't a joke guy at all, so some viewers misran his Tonight Show appearances as unfunny because he didn't perform in the normal late-night rhythm everyone expected. On his 1980 Carson appearance, the audience laughs at the contrast between Johnny's parody energy and Rogers' calm, sincere responses. Rogers doesn't play for laughs back. Instead, he answers gently and earnestly, which can feel like jokes are bouncing off him, even though that's exactly the point of who he is. His vibe is intentionally disarming and wholesome. He speaks slowly and thoughtfully, like he's talking to one person instead of a studio full of people waiting for punchlines. That alone breaks the late-night contract most viewers are used to. Carson tosses setups the way he always does, and Rogers responds like a human being instead of a comedian. Not deflecting, not escalating, not trying to win the moment, just answering honestly and staying present. For some people, that reads as awkward or flat, because the usual rhythm never kicks in. There's no back-and-forth volley of jokes, no competitive banter, no payoff laugh that releases the tension. The silence hangs longer than people are comfortable with on a comedy show. You can feel the audience unsure of what their role even is. Should they laugh or listen? Rogers doesn't guide them toward laughter because he isn't there to entertain in that way. He's there to connect. That difference matters. Late-night audiences are trained to respond fast and loudly. Rogers asks them to slow down without ever saying it out loud. What makes it more uncomfortable for some viewers is that Carson clearly respects him. He softens his own energy to match Rogers, instead of trying to steamroll him with jokes. That's rare on The Tonight Show. Carson usually controls the rhythm of the room completely. With Rogers, he lets the moment breathe. That choice quietly tells the audience this isn't a bit that's failing. It's a different kind of exchange altogether. But not everyone catches that in real time. Rogers' sincerity also removes irony from the equation. Late-night comedy often relies on layers of irony and self-awareness. Rogers doesn't operate there at all. He says exactly what he means and means exactly what he says. That kind of emotional directness can make people squirm, because there's nothing to hide behind. No joke armor, no sarcasm, no wink to let you off the hook. He's comfortable being gentle on a show built for sharpness. So when people say Rogers was unfunny on Carson, what they're really reacting to is discomfort, not failure. He was refusing to perform the role they expected him to play. He wasn't there to be clever or edgy or fast. He was there to be kind and steady and sincere, in a space that rarely allowed that tone to exist for more than a few seconds. That mismatch is exactly why some viewers labeled it awkward, while others remember it as strangely memorable. It wasn't comedy dying, it was comedy stepping aside. Did any of these unfunny and uncomfortable moments make it painful for you to watch? Do you think any of these guests were actually funny, but just had a genuinely bad night? And are there other guests you remember bombing hard that we didn't include on this list? Write down in the comments below, and if you want more deep dives into the awkward, uncomfortable, forgotten side of Tonight Show history, make sure you hit the subscribe button to support the channel and keep these videos coming.